It's very hard to do something truly high impact when you're going along that path. And most of the highest impact things people do in the world look crazy. They're sort of bad ideas. Most people disagree with them. And I haven't really experienced too much of that, frankly, in my professional career. Personal life is where I can experiment with these crazy things. Professional life, you're on a certain path and it matters what your parents say to you, what your friends say to you, all of that stuff. And so I hit a point in my career where that was all great and it led to an amazing experience at Google and great growth and learning. But I wanted to do something that people thought was stupid because I thought it would create more learning, more growth, more impact.
Max, good morning. Thanks for being on Live Long and Prosper. It's so good to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm sure today's going to be a really exciting conversation. And before we get into the actual staples of the conversation, I do want to make sure you know that we will cover a little bit on your views on crypto, given all of the stuff that's been happening. Exciting times in crypto land indeed.
Sounds great.
But let's get started with the core of the podcast, which is, the pivotal decisions that you made in life regarding career, life, money, and how all of these have played together to help you get to where you are. A lot of our listeners will, want to be where Max is at some point in their lives. So why don't we start off with talking about a few of these pivotal points that you feel have played a big part in your career?
Yeah, I'll start with one pivotal point actually that was pre-career, because I think a lot of the career decisions people make are actually shaped probably by early experiences they have. And that was certainly the case for me. So one of the most pivotal points before my career even started was losing a bunch of money on the internet. So when I was about 14, probably, I discovered the power of the internet when I started an eBay business. eBay was fairly new at the time, and I discovered because I could code in HTML, I taught myself how to code. I could make a site on eBay that looked pretty professional, much more professional than a typical 14-year-old site. And I discovered an arbitrage where I could go to in-person auctions to acquire items at a discount and sell them on eBay into a global market at a higher price point with my fancy website. This was an incredibly powerful thing. It was totally mind-boggling.
What kind of auctions were these? What kind of items?
The oddest and craziest things. I mean, everything from ballpoint pens. I had thousands of ballpoint pens in my house at one point, to shoes, to coffee. There was a coffee roaster in my local neighborhood that went out of business, and they had thousands of bags of coffee that they didn't know what to do with. And I kind of got hooked on it. Like, I could go get these things for cheap, for almost nothing. And I uniquely had access to sell to the entire world because I had figured out eBay. And most people at the time didn't. These were old traditional businesses that just sold to whoever walked in the door, basically. And so the first thing was, wow, this is really powerful. The power of the internet and technology to be able to do this. But the even more pivotal point in this was when I sold, and I remember very distinctly, it was an iPod mini. So you can kind of place the era based on the product. I think they were launched in 2004 or something like that. I sold an iPod mini for about $300. I got a check in the mail, because this is how payments were made in the early days of eBay. The check came probably 10 days after I completed the sale. I went to cash the check and it was fake. There was no money in the account. And the powerful thing about this was, payments at the time were on this traditional financial system. People sent personal checks, and it was very easily to defraud people. There was no instant settlement. There was no verification of what they were. And a couple of years later, I kind of persisted at this after having that really rough wake-up call on being defrauded as a 14-year-old for an iPod. All my hard work to go into building this great website, and I lost the $300. And a couple of years later, PayPal was really deeply integrated into eBay, and the power of PayPal to enable safe, secure transactions on the internet was even more impressive to me. And it opened up the ability to scale. So I went from local auctions to then buying on other types of auctions on the internet. And I actually scaled a bit of a business. And for me, the pivotal moment was both kind of the power of the internet, but also how broken the financial system was and how much potential there was for digitization of payments and the whole financial system. So that was pre-career. I don't think I ever thought of that as a professional experience or how that would play out in my career later. But fast forward maybe 20 years from that, and I think the next most pivotal experience was probably taking the leap to leave Google and join Coinbase. And there were a number of pivotal steps in the interim, which we can go into. But I'd been at Google for about 5 years, and you and I, Caesar, were building Google Pay in India together. And it was an incredible experience. I felt like the luckiest person in the world to be on that team, to be inventing a new payments product for India. We had looked at the market, I guess, in 2015 or 2014, something like that. And we said, this market looks like eBay did 20 years ago. There is no real financial system enabling healthy development of the market. It's a cash-based economy. There are 20 million credit cards for 1.3 billion people in India at the time. And yet there are 300 million Android smartphones that people are using on the internet every day. And so we said, geez, we can leapfrog sort of the way that the West came onto digital payments and actually do it in a much better way in India. And so we had this amazing experience. We built on top of UPI with instant settlement, but there were problems with it. And some of those problems benefited us and some of those problems hurt us. And I think the things that, when I reflected on that, one of those problems was it was a permission network built by the Indian government, right? We were beneficiaries of that because thanks to many of the great people at Google, we had a big company, great regulatory affairs and engagement, we were able to get access. But there were others who were trying to build on UPI who could not get access. And that was good for us, not good for the economy overall and access to building on this. It was also domestic. So once we wanted to expand beyond India, it was very difficult to expand beyond India. We had to start over in other places. And third, it was basically single use. I mean, it was basically for moving money around. You couldn't really do much more with it. So it was very powerful, but it had these limitations. And around the same time, crypto was emerging. And, I read the Bitcoin white paper about this decentralized peer-to-peer network, and Ethereum had just launched around that time. And it looked kind of similar to what was happening in India with UPI, but it solved some of those critical problems. It was permissionless. Anyone could build on top of it. It was global. There were no kind of domestic borders around it. And the invention of smart contracts, particularly with Ethereum, meant you could do a lot more with it than just move money. So I was kind of like hooked on this idea. I was loving everything we were doing at Google, but I was kind of hooked on this idea of crypto and decided to give it a shot. We can talk more about kind of why and how I thought about that. But, early 2018 joined Coinbase and really around kind of pursuing the same mission that we had been focused on for a long time with this new technology, new capabilities, and haven't really looked back from that.
Let's dig in a little bit more. It's fascinating. Obviously there's a big amount of passion about something new and interesting, but you were also jumping from Google, where you were doing really well in a very good role, to, a good startup and a startup that was doing well, but still a startup at that point, right? Coinbase was not at the scale it is today when you joined. And how do you think of that? And then second, it was also going from, again, the security of a company to, of traditional finance. You were getting equity to Coinbase, where a lot of your comp is crypto, and that changed. And, also the dynamics of work-life balance between a large company to small company. Love to get into these things and how you thought through, and if you could put yourself at that moment, how did you make that decision to take that leap?
At the time, it was a bit of a crazy decision. And the anchor for the decision was very much how to maximize impact. It came from exactly the same thing. The way that I've worked for a long time, and the way that your team worked at Google and we all worked together, was we just sink everything we have into the problem we're trying to solve. And that was how I worked. Everything I was doing was to solve that problem. So the thing that hooked me on Coinbase and on crypto was how to solve the problem. It was how to enable economic freedom in the world and better access to financial services. So that was the hook. But even after that hook, man, it was still a crazy decision. And that was part of what was attractive to me about it. So I think a couple of the things that were attractive were, one, it was crazy. Most people thought it was a bad idea. And I was at a stage in my career where I sort of wanted to do something that most people thought was a bad idea. It was a reflection that most of my life and career, and most people's lives, I think, run through these institutions where there's a right way to do things. You get good grades in school so you can go to a good university. You get good grades in university so you can work at a large established company. You perform well against their career rubric so that you can get promoted, and so on and so forth. And that you can live a very successful career that way. But it's very hard to do something truly high impact when you're going along that path. And most of the highest impact things people do in the world look crazy. They're sort of bad ideas. Most people disagree with them. And I haven't really experienced too much of that, frankly, in my professional career. I had done a lot in my personal life, like the eBay thing was, people thought was a bad idea. What are you doing going and buying this stuff? And all kinds of stuff in my personal life. But I had in my mind, a pretty clear division of personal life is where I can experiment with these crazy things. Professional life, you're on a certain path and it matters what your parents say to you, what your friends say to you, all of that stuff. And so I hit a point in my career where that was all great. And it led to an amazing experience at Google and great growth and learning. But I wanted to do something that people thought was stupid because I thought it would create more learning, more growth, more impact. So that was one thing, do something that people thought was a bad idea. Second thing was I liked how hard it was going to be. I knew that it was going to be incredibly difficult, that it would push me beyond any limits that I had known or met before and maybe break me. Like that was part of what was attractive about it. And I wanted to do that. And then I think on the financial side, it was probably the last consideration, I would say. If it had been the first consideration, I wouldn't have done it because I took a pay cut to Google to go to Coinbase. The only real, I would say the real consideration on the financial side was if this thing blows up, how bad is it really? And my assessment there was if it blows up, it would certainly be a negative financial impact in the short term. But the learning and the growth and the sort of personal experience I would have would still be very much additive to my career, my perspectives, my capabilities, such that kind of future financial prospects would probably not really be impacted by, certainly not negatively impacted, maybe positively impacted. And so that was a bit of a luxury I had because I had a foundation from my time at Google and other companies before that. But it was a luxury that I'm really grateful for because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to take that big risk at that time.
That's fantastic. And obviously, it's worked out really well for you and you've done incredibly well. Are there any other pivotal points later that you had to make a certain decision? Like this was a very straightforward one, but something while inside Coinbase and you had to make a decision to change and that was tough and
Yeah,
hard.
there've been a number. And it's funny when you're at a company for a long time. I've been at Coinbase about 7 years. By tech standards, I think that's a very, very long time.
That's a very
Uh,
long time.
I'm basically a dinosaur. And one of the reasons that I can do that, and I think people stay, is when you're in a dynamic company that's growing really fast, that's evolving, it's not the same place every 2 years. It's a new and different place with different opportunities. And so there have been lots of sort of pivotal moments throughout the 7 years at Coinbase. I would say I'll share two others. One was I joined Coinbase actually to start our corporate development team initially. So I'd been working on product at Google. I loved product. I was in the trenches building every day. And when I went to join Coinbase, we were looking around at what could be highest impact. I had this conviction that Coinbase was building something really important for the world and that I wanted to contribute to that. As we were looking for what was highest impact, could have been product, but we were also trying to build out a corporate development team that was going to go acquire, partner, invest in other companies in the space. And I had two considerations around that. One was just join the rocket ship. I mean, this is an environment that I need to be in. I don't know where it will go over time, but I need to find a way to be there and contribute. And second was learn a new set of skills. I've been doing product at Google. I was at a stage in my career where I loved product, but I had plenty of opportunity to learn other things also. And I wasn't sure what is the long term? What can I be highest impact at myself? So I tried corporate development. It was an awesome experience. I was thrown in the deep end. I probably made lots of mistakes. In my first year, we acquired about 12 companies. We invested in about 40 companies in 1 year.
Wow.
It was a privilege to work with, Brian, our founder, Emily Choi, who was leading the business team overall and had led corporate development teams for a long time, and our board, which really had an appetite for a fairly early stage company to do a lot of M&A and investing. And so I had a lot of reps to learn. But what I discovered, and this was the first pivotal moment, what I discovered was on nights and weekends, I was doing product work. That was the thing that I was passionate about. I was writing PRDs. I was jamming with the product teams and the engineers. And so after about a year or so on the corporate development team, I was lucky enough to have hired some people who were way better at corporate development than I was. And I was doing product work on kind of nights and weekends on the side. And so at some point it sort of made sense. And Brian asked me to go lead the consumer product team. And it was the right fit. It was just the right place for me to have the most impact on the company. And so that was another pivotal moment, kind of trying something, discovering that other thing of corporate development wasn't the thing where I could be highest impact in the world. And then finding my way back to product where I could be sort of maximum impact. So that was a second. And then the other pivotal moment, just adding on to that, was it wouldn't look like a pivotal moment if you look at the resume because nothing happened. But in crypto and at Coinbase, that was pivotal. So 2019, 2020 were really tough times in crypto. And the market, I remember folks talk about price a lot in crypto, the price of Bitcoin. So the price of Bitcoin in, I think, March 2020 dropped to something like $3,000 for a Bitcoin. And in February, it was, the market was uncertain. People were questioning it. I was getting calls from my parents saying, hey, maybe this thing was a mistake. Like, what I told you was a mistake before. Will you acknowledge now that you were wrong? It was a mistake. And I got a lot of told you so's from friends and family and other people. And they said, okay, now why don't you go back to Google? Go, you got lots of good opportunities. Go do something where you can really build a career. And the pivotal moment there was sticking with it and really having conviction that what we were building and what the industry was building was meaningful and was substantive and was long-term still the best way to solve this mission of creating economic freedom in the world. And I had to believe that the people on the outside just couldn't see that I had a unique insight, and I had to really believe in it and bet on myself and bet on the team and the company. And that was incredibly difficult, but I'm really glad, in retrospect, I'm really glad I did. It was probably a combination of some good insight and a little bit of luck. It was not obvious in the moment to do that. A lot of people didn't stick it out, but I think the long-term vision that we had at the company, that Brian really set at the top of the company, was really powerful in helping me kind of maintain that conviction and keep building at Coinbase.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. As you were thinking through that particular decision to stay, I'm glad you picked a choice where the decision was not to make a change, right? And because that's also as important as sometimes deciding to change. Do you talk to others? Did you reflect on it just by yourself, or within the company? What were your inputs that went into that? Or was it just your personal conviction?
It's funny. I talked to a lot of people and almost all of them said I should leave. I mean, it was much easier. It was much easier at that time. Take yourself back to 2019, 2020, unclear regulatory environment, prices in crypto were crashing. A lot of entrepreneurs were exiting. A lot of VCs had invested and their funds had blown up because of it. I mean, it was much easier to say, cut your losses, get out. And a lot of people said that. There were certainly, some people on the other side, a lot of people at Coinbase who maintained conviction, as I chatted with folks like Brian and the board and others, maintained that conviction. But most people said no. And so one of the discoveries from that was you need a healthy degree of disagreeableness to make the best decisions. And you need to be comfortable in that. You need to be comfortable that people who love you, people who are close friends and family and want the best for you, will tell you the wrong thing accidentally. And it's not a negative reflection on them. It's not a negative reflection on you if you disagree with those people. In fact, it's a sign of kind of love and support to be able to have those types of conversations and get advice that you accept, you consider, and you disagree with clear thought and principles. And it's something that that was very hard at the time, is actually a very core part of the way that we work at Coinbase. Even like disagreeableness and having kind of clear debate and disagreements is part of how we make our best product decisions. But in that moment, it was something that also helped me make the best career decision.
I can imagine. Though you're probably the nicest, disagreeable, I'd probably know. So let's switch tracks a little bit. I actually want to talk a little bit about how you've thought about money and the role money plays in life as it comes to career, personal life. Like, are you conscious about it? Do you plan? Do you like look at your finances on a regular basis? You get money, finance, whatever you want to call it.
It's a great topic because it's so core to what I do professionally, and also kind of there's a personal side to it in terms of how I think about it overall and professionally. It's so core to everything I work on. I think that economic freedom is a critical enabler for happiness, success, all kinds of things that people need. I mean, you look at economic freedom. Economic freedom is actually a sort of a metric that can be measured, and it's correlated with all kinds of things that we want to see in the world, like positive health outcomes and reduced crime rates and measures of happiness. And so I do think that economic freedom, financial freedom is a critical enabler. I don't think it's fully sufficient. I think it's necessary, perhaps, but not sufficient for overall life happiness. And so, because of that, it's why I've poured so much of my life into creating economic freedom for others. On a personal basis, I think about it in sort of a similar way. I think that economic freedom or financial comfort or stability is a critical enabler, and I think it's worth pursuing as an enabler. I feel very grateful to kind of have been able to achieve that through different parts of my career. But it's not at least at this stage of my career, my life, it's not the thing that I wake up and think about every day. And I'm very lucky to be in that position where I can wake up and think about how do I have a positive impact on the world? And the sort of financial part of it can be correlated with that rather than the primary sort of objective. And so I think it is a pretty good indicator, frankly, of positive impact on the world. It's not the only indicator or the best indicator, but I think a lot of times if you're having positive impact on the world, that will generate economic impact. It may be on a very long-term time horizon, but eventually if you are creating value, that value will be recognized in some way. And so I think they're positively reinforcing is generally how I think about it. And lucky that I don't have to focus on just short-term financial benefits, because I think that can be limiting in driving that real long-term impact.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. I know that's a little bit of a personal question because everyone sort of views money and finance sort of in a very different way. Um, but for money and finance, let's jump now to the world of crypto. So wanted to get you've been at an incredible vantage point in crypto. And so where do you think we are today in the adoption of crypto across the world? And particularly given the ups and downs of the last few years, what are your thoughts that you can share about sort of the adoption, how it's growing, and where you see it going?
Yeah, I think we're still in the relatively early innings of adoption, but I think we are seeing pretty meaningful adoption in a number of different places. So there's about 50 million Americans that own crypto. There's hundreds of millions of people around the world that own crypto today. Governments around the world talking about crypto. President Trump just announced a strategic crypto reserve with 5 cryptocurrencies that's going to be a part of it, and maybe more to add over time. Some of these things were sort of unimaginable a few years ago. And it's pretty clear now that we've crossed the chasm from maybe a toy or a niche into something that is a meaningful part of our financial system. And so that is a really significant step, I think, in kind of global mass adoption. I think there's general sort of understanding that Bitcoin may be a better form of gold and that it has a lot of similar properties, but also potential improvements on top of gold. And so we've crossed, I would say, like the first chasm. I think we're still early enough, though, that there's a lot of people that still don't own crypto. And even if you add all those folks up, it's probably less than 10% of the world that owns crypto. And so I see every day the incredible value that crypto can create for people, and the 90% of people around the world that don't own it yet. And I say we're still very early. I think that there's still a lot of room for improved regulatory clarity around the world. We're making progress, but there's still uncertainty. The technology has improved dramatically, but there's still room for improvement in the technology. And I think the use case is still kind of the utility of crypto, going beyond crypto as an asset class only into really delivering on financial services and applications. I think that those use cases are still being developed and we see signs of them. So, stablecoin transaction volume last year hit $30 trillion,
$30 trillion.
30 trillion, which is more than Visa and MasterCard combined. And so people who say, where's the utility in crypto? I say it's happening. It's happening, but it's not everywhere yet. And so I think we see those signs, but it's early enough. There's still a lot more work to do. I think over the next couple of years, we will see most of the financial system start to move on chain in different ways. I think that personal finance will move on chain. I think a lot of the financial services you get from traditional institutions will be better offered on chain. And that could be from on-chain native companies like Coinbase. It could be from traditional finance companies that integrate more crypto and on-chain capabilities. But the power of the technology is so compelling that I think over the next couple of years, we'll go from the sort of 10% or less than 10% of people in the world that own crypto to something more like 50% and beyond.
So what do you think are the key pivotal things to drive that adoption? Is it adoption by, as you said, not the non-native companies that start using them for other purposes? Or what do you think takes this number from 10% to 60%?
If you asked me that question 2 years ago, I probably would have said regulatory clarity and technology were like the two major barriers. Like there was just too much uncertainty in the regulatory environment. Companies were getting sued left and right. They didn't know why. And that really stunted innovation and development in the space. And two, the technology, it wasn't there yet. It was, in some cases, it was still too slow. It was still too hard to use. That was probably 2 years ago. I think now what I would say is a lot of the technology challenges have been solved. And this is one of the fun parts of being on the inside, because on the outside, when you look at headlines about crypto, they don't really talk about the actual technology or the actual products. It's mostly like the prices of things. And so one of the really powerful things about being on the inside and being someone who's in the trenches with your hands on it is I can see the technology actually solving real problems now. So I would say that's actually been solved. Regulatory clarity is improving dramatically. It's not fully solved. We need legislation in the United States that creates clear rules for market structure, for stable coins, for other things, but it's getting solved. And so the next critical thing to solve after regulatory clarity is the use cases. And the use cases, I'd put them in two categories in particular that I think will help us catapult. One is in payments. I mentioned $30 trillion of volume in stablecoins, kind of mind-boggling. It's still hardly usable. I mean, most of that volume is through large companies or niche use cases in different parts of the world, and people are jumping through hoops to be able to move money in stablecoins because it's more efficient. They're saving money when you're moving money, for example, from Brazil to the United States or from Argentina back to the United States. If you're a large company, you're paying 5%, 10% in fees sometimes. You're waiting 3 days, 5 days sometimes for those payments to settle. It's incredibly costly to you as a business. Stable coins now are solving that problem, and they're solving it so well that these companies are willing to use like the worst products ever to do it. And so I think that so one thing is make those products great, right? If people are using it already, that's always a great sign. If they're using a bad product to do a thing, it's a great sign that there's opportunity to build a great product. So I think payments is one area where the usability and the use cases need to improve. And the second is applications beyond payments. So one of the really interesting things that's happening in this space now is non-financial applications are moving on chain. You have the creator economy, for example, where on TikTok or Instagram, creators are building their businesses and most of their profit is being taken by a centralized platform. And their followership, their community, it's all owned by that platform. And so you sink your blood, your life, your everything to building this, and then it's not yours. It's owned by a third-party platform. And one of the interesting things happening on chain is decentralized community and decentralized social is enabling creators to own their own followership and to own their own content and to monetize directly. And similar to the way in financial services, crypto is taking out the middleman and creating more efficiency in the system. In all other parts of the economy, I think that's going to happen too. And so I think we'll see products like on-chain Instagram or on-chain TikTok that actually accelerate their growth even faster than the sort of centralized platforms. And I think those two, if I think about payments of financial services and then sort of creator economy and social, I think those are going to be areas we see a lot of innovation, and it leapfrogs from 10% of the global population that's using it as an investment class to everyone around the world that's participating for their everyday life.
That's fascinating. Are there any products or apps that you're really excited about in these spaces, in the creator economy space? Or I'm deliberately avoiding the transaction space because that'll be Coinbase, but in the
Yeah, well,
creator
I think
economy.
I do think I mean, I don't mind. I think Coinbase within the financial services and payment space, I think is super interesting platform. I mean, we can see it every day, the power of enabling financial services that are built in this open on-chain economy to be accessible by end users. And it's a rethinking of the way financial services work, where today you go to a single financial institution that's vertically integrated, typically all the way through. You have a bank that's offering a financial product that's managed by their own risk management team, that all the way through. And the interesting thing that Coinbase is doing, and what's happening in crypto, is that the financial services are built on this open ecosystem. They can be built by anyone, anywhere in the world, and we can distribute those to our customers and make it really seamless and safe for people to use. And so that sort of open platform, it's kind of like Amazon, which enabled third-party sellers. And suddenly it didn't need to be the retailer that was doing everything itself, but it could open an ecosystem to all the third-party sellers and then distribute those to customers. And so I think the future of financial services is on chain. And I think Coinbase is going to be the place that people go get those financial services. So that is on one side. In terms of interesting kind of social and community stuff, there's a lot of experimentation right now. Base is a layer 2 network that Coinbase has created. Some really interesting apps in that space. There's one called Farcaster, which is a social protocol that is decentralized. There's another called Zora, which is kind of like an on-chain Instagram. And, you can post. I just posted a picture the other day that was just the sort of thing I might post otherwise on Instagram. But instead of just, empty likes on it and sharing, people minted it. They bought the content that I created. And I had an actual financial benefit to kind of posting. And then people could actually take that and remix it and sell it and trade it and all kinds of things. And so really interesting. It's pretty early days in a lot of that, but you can see the power of this open ecosystem where creators are incentivized in new and different ways that I think will be more viral, actually, and more rewarding for people. And so in the same vein as economic freedom with financial services, I think economic freedom with your content, with your community, that is also being enabled by this on-chain ecosystem.
Super interesting. So we've covered crypto. Over the last couple of years, at least, AI has been a really big thing. How is the crypto world getting affected by AI, and how do you see all of that coming together?
I think they're coming together in really interesting ways, actually. So I would say two main categories. One is AI in the operations of a business. And I think this is something a lot of people are experiencing, and we're certainly spending a lot of time on. The other is AI and crypto as a product. And this is probably unique to some of the things that are happening in crypto. So I'll save that one for a second. First, just how AI is being integrated into the business. Any financial services business, I mean, fraud, customer support, compliance, these are incredibly difficult, kind of complex tasks that financial services businesses in particular have to invest a lot into. And we're lucky to kind of be when you're on the pioneering edge of any technology, you want to be on the pioneering edge of every technology. And so because of where we sit in the ecosystem, we've been pretty forward looking in adopting crypto in adopting AI, in a lot of those spaces. And, some of our compliance or CX workflows, for example, that might take 45 minutes or an hour typically can now be done in like 5 minutes. And that is incredibly powerful. It translates to better experiences for customers, enables us to focus on building better products. So just a lot of power there that I think is still like in the pretty early innings. But then as a product, the area that I'm really interested in is AI agents having wallets and being able to transact. So today, AI agents can't really access most of your financial life or most of the financial infrastructure. They can't really check out for you in e-commerce. They can't really manage your money because those are all enclosed systems. In crypto and in this on-chain economy that's permissionless and open, you can have AI agents with wallets that can actually move money and access your money. And so we think every AI agent should have a wallet. We want to give every AI agent a wallet, and we want to empower them then to support financial activity for users, for businesses. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to create a lot of innovation in how people use financial services. So, and how people build financial services. Like today, you have to build all of the connections between different services, different entities. In the future, an AI agent can make those connections for you while it's using your wallet. So we have a product called Agent Kit, which is a developer product enabling wallets for agents. And I think there's a lot more we can do there. But I see that space and that connection between AI and wallets in particular as unlocking new kinds of financial services really efficient.
Wow. Economic freedom for agents.
That's right.
Super interesting. Super interesting. Hey, Max, this has been a great conversation. I wanted to end with 3 rapid fire questions. So whatever comes to the top of your mind. Okay. So I'll say a little statement and then there's a blank, and please you fill in the blank. So,
okay.
If you want to prosper, never underestimate the power of dash.
Disagreeableness.
Disagreeableness. Wow. I think I'll agree with you on that. The 3 key ingredients for a long, fulfilling life are dash, dash, and dash.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana.
Wow. Spoken like a true crypto believer. Amazing. Okay. The simple joy that adds years to my life is
celebrating the successes of others.
That's beautiful. I think on that note, Max, thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you and having you on Live Long and Prosper.
Thank you, Caesar.